Hello again, everyone. It is June 8th, 2025. I'm in Utica, New York, at Union Station, along the rails of CSX and the Adirondack Railroad. This morning I'm going to once again venture up to Tupper Lake to take a look at the station up there and see how they've progressed since my last trip up at the end of April. This also is the 1-year anniversary of my first journey up to Tupper to check out the station improvements. Just a little farther down is where Adirondack Railroad boards its Utica passengers. You can see the railroad is leasing some former CT rail coaches they just received on the property this year. It's 108 miles by rail from here to Tupper Lake. About 15 more by highway. Conditions are hazy here in Utica this morning due to the Canadian wildfires. But it's a cool, pleasant morning, 58 degrees. So onward to Tupper Lake. I've decided to take a different route at Tupper Lake today. Instead of going through Old Forge on Route 28, I'm going to head north on New York State 8, which take me to Speculator and Indian Lake before heading westward, get to Blue Mountain Lake, and then I'll get on Route 28 and head to Tupper that way. The Blue Mountain Lake to Tupper route, of course, is the way I usually go coming up on Route 28. So a slightly different way. A little bit farther, but I've got nothing else to do this morning. This is Poland. When the Adirondack Railroad was built in 1892, it came north out of Herkimer, and it did go through Poland. However, the tracks north from Herkimer to Poland were torn up in the early 1970s. The tracks from Herkimer went through Poland and then to Remsen. And the tracks north of Poland to Remsen were torn up well before the 1970s. So when the Adirondack trains depart Utica for Old Forge and Big Moose, Tupper Lake. They come out of Utica going through Marcy and Holland Patton, and then we'll go into Remsen. And a couple miles north of the Remsen depot is where Adirondack trains go onto their home rails. They lease 85 miles of track from Remsen to Tupper Lake. The tracks are owned and maintained by New York State. The first 23 miles out of Utica are on trackage rights via the Mohawk, Adirondack, and Northern Railroad. And just a mile or so north of Poland is the tiny community of Cold Brook. To my right is the West Canada Creek. This is Nobleboro, 34 miles from Utica's Union Station. Oh, about 35 years ago, when I was in a little better shape, I rode my bike up here from my home in New Hartford. We're crossing the West Canada Creek. There was a different bridge here at that time, and once I reached that point, I turned back and headed back home. On the way back, an incident occurred that I'll remember forever. A couple of dogs became very aggressive in their chase of me, and I began to brake in order to try to put the bike between me and those marauding canines, and I applied the brakes a little too quickly, and I went head over heels down to the pavement. Must have shocked the dogs because they didn't bother me after that, and I was a little banged up, but I made it back to New Hartford with no problems. Just a little road rash. This is Lake Pleasant, 60 miles from Union Station. Lake Pleasant is the county seat of Hamilton County, New York's smallest county by population. And 63 miles from Union Station finds me in Speculator. Where we'll leave Route 28 and head north on New York State 30 towards Indian Lake. Blue Mountain Lake, 35 miles from here, where we'll get on 28 north, having bypassed Old Forge. I'm 86.8 miles from Union Station. This is a scenic overlook in Indian Lake. This is the hamlet of Indian Lake. The station stop is Indian Lake, New York. And I've reached Blue Mountain Lake, 99 miles from Utica's Union Station. This is Long Lake, 110 miles from Union Station by this roundabout way that I've come up today. Not quite at the station, but I thought I'd stop and get the view here. 130 miles from Union Station. This is Tupper Lake, where the Racket River flows into it. Well, I've arrived at Tupper Lake Depot. As mentioned in the beginning of this video, it's 108 miles by rail from here to Utica. Coming up the way that I did on Route 8 through Poland and Speculator, then over to Indian Lake, Blue Mountain Lake, it's 134 miles, so 26 more miles by road on that route. The other way to come up here, the last few times, the route I chose is coming up through Old Forge. Coming up that way is 122 miles, so 14 miles extra by road instead of rail coming up through Old Forge. So this roundabout way was 12 miles farther, and I did enjoy coming up the other way. A little more remote. Anyhow, we're in Tupper Lake, as I mentioned, so let's take a look at the improvements. A lot's been accomplished since I was here last year on June 8th, and even since I was here at the end of April. I'll link to both those videos in the description. The first run of the year up here, I believe, is in the middle of July sometime. At 216 miles round trip. I've been told this is the longest regularly scheduled excursion rail passenger trip in the United States. I've made the trip 2 times and hope to make it again this year. And I'll take a walk over to the other passenger shelter. I think the state's done a fantastic job here in Tupper Lake. My only lament, and it's a big one, is that, of course, the tracks were ripped up from Tupper Lake to Placid in favor of a trail after many, many years of controversy between rail advocates and trail advocates. It's still a work in progress. go over and take a look at the rebuilt Y in a minute. Of course, that will, as most of you watching this video know, will allow the engines coming up from Utica to go over in those tracks, back up, come back down this way without having to reposition themselves on a runaround track. So they'll be facing south after going through the Y. End of platform, and probably a half mile or so beyond this point is the end of the tracks. So I'll head over to the Y and take a look at that. This line, of course, was at one time part of the New York Central's Adirondack division. Time to go take a look at the Y, because why not? Mr. and Mrs. Duck. What do you guys think of the improvements? There goes Mrs. Mallard. You better follow her if you know what's good for you, fella. And here's the northerly leg of the very nicely rebuilt Y. Besides the improvements of those new passenger shelters, we're looking at a new engine house built for the Adirondack Railroad. So, from the grounds of the very nicely improved Tupper Lake, New York passenger station along the rails of the Adirondack Railroad, this is Railroading Rambler saying thank you all so much for watching this video. Be told stayed home today, but I'll be sure to film in all the highlights of today's trip. Be sure to check out the website for the Adirondack Railroad for all the trips this season, and including the High Peaks Limited, which is the name given the railroad of the big trip up from Utica to Tupper and back. 216 miles round trip.